Hey everybody, Father Warner here. We are in the fourth day of Christmas, or the fourth day of the octave in Christmas, and we are celebrating today the Feast of the Holy Innocents. The first reading is taken from the first book of John, chapter 1, verses 5 to chapter 2, verse 2. Remember that in the octave, when we do not have a Sunday Mass or a feast day, we continue all through the octave taking the first reading from the first letter of St. John. And the Gospel is taken from Matthew chapter 2, verses 13 to 18. Obviously, it talks of the slaughter of the innocents. Now, I am not going to preach a feel-good homily today. Some of you might even take offense to some of the thoughts that I have, but let it settle into your heart and see whether what I'm really saying is true or not. Because very often when we agree with the preacher, we agree because what he says is good for someone else, not because it confronts our own heart and soul. So I'm going to give you both secular reflections, and by secular I mean not directly linked to the gospel text of today, but linked to the theme of the Holy Innocents, and also some interesting religious thoughts. Now, I just want to begin very quickly because there are many people who doubt that the massacre of the Holy Innocents really took place, and they doubt it because if you do some historical or archaeological research on this matter, you will discover that barring Matthew's Gospel, there are no other what we call extra biblical sources that talk about the massacre of the Holy Innocents. But I'm going to explain this by explaining who the protagonist is, the King Herod. Now, we know that King Herod was born in about 72 BC. We know that he was given the title of the King of the Jews by the Roman Senate. Remember, he was not a Jew. He was from Edom. He was an Idumean, but he ruled as King of the Jews. And if you know anything about King Herod, while he's called Herod the Great because of the great buildings that he put up, the temple in Jerusalem was really his work. It was amazing. It was a great architectural feat at that point of time. But Herod was also an insecure man. He was very proud, he was selfish, he was very greedy, and he was afraid of losing power. Now, we know that Herod in his lifetime had an 18-year-old high priest who was a relative of his executed because he thought this was competition to him. We know that Herod killed his own mother-in-law. We know that Herod killed his second wife, whom he loved very dearly, loved her to death, all pun intended, because he had her put to death. We know that Herod killed 3 of his sons, one of whom was killed 5 days before his own death. We know that Herod put about 300 military personnel to death. We know that he also put a lot of Pharisees to death because they predicted his passing away. This was a despot. I mean, the Romans often said it was better to be Herod's pig than to be Herod's son. Now, in the light of a man who history has recorded, so the extra biblical sources record a lot about Herod, but his other acts have been so infamous that a tiny death of 6 children in Bethlehem might have seemed very insignificant for a historian to record. And you'll say, Father, only 6 children died. Once again, there are biblical sources and there are, so let me put it this way, what we have in the Bible is called the canon. So these are the acceptable books, but there are many other writings that exist that tell us, writings from the early church, that tell us that there could have been anywhere between 14,000 to 12,000 children killed. But archaeologists have told us very clearly that Bethlehem would have had barely 300 people. And if that was so, then there would have been about 4 to 6 babies who were boys under the age of 2. Having said that, every life matters. But here's the point I'm making. It would have been so insignificant to record this in non-biblical sources, and that is why perhaps even great Roman historians like Josephus would have not written it. But the fact that we don't find it in non-biblical sources doesn't mean it didn't happen. Second, we use the term the feast of the Holy Innocents. Innocence is not opposed to innocent versus guilty. That's a judicial term to say he is innocent, he is not guilty. Here we use the term Holy Innocence because it means the absence of guilt of any disloyalty to God. These were children who were innocent of the fact that they had not offended God. And in that, I'd like you to read very clearly the first reading taken from 1 John chapter 1 verse 5. It really talks about our own innocence and our sins. Some of you might say, but Father, all of this is not fair. Why did God allow little children to be slaughtered, even if they were 4 or 6 children? Why did God even allow it? I think I'd like to turn that question on its head. Why do we allow little children to be slaughtered today? You see, nobody wants to answer that question in our own time. A few years ago, we had the outbreak of the clerical sex abuse. It was a huge scandal. And so many people were offended, and rightly so. I'm not diminishing it. Rightly so. So many people were so offended by what the clergy had done to little children. How come we are not offended today when little children are being slaughtered as we speak in Gaza? How is it that we are not offended today when we have children who are sold into slavery and prostitution? How is it that we are not offended when children are made into soldiers and taught to kill other people? You know, we might think that God didn't care for these little children. God spared his little son so that 4 or 6 other little innocent children would be saved. Hang on, because 33 years later, God allowed his own son, his own innocent son, to be put to death for us. So God did not spare his only son. God did not spare his only son because there was a mission, there was a purpose. And that purpose had to be fulfilled to save you and me. Another thought that ran to my head was this, that, sometimes we come up with slogans that sound very nice because of a particular event that has taken place. We had one a few years ago that said Black Lives Matter. And then people said, well, another group of people said, all lives matter. And I was wondering, really, do all lives matter? Of course, all lives should matter. Black lives should matter, brown lives should matter. But when we say all lives matter, what about the unborn children? Do those lives matter? Because you see, we have another yardstick when it comes to the unborn child. We don't even want to accept that they are children. I think today children have become pawns of politics. And we need to be careful when we don't give importance to issues like abortion. Many years ago, my dear friend Joe Cordo, who I've made reference to once before, spoke of, he had come out with a video, this was about 25 years ago, called The Culture of Life, the Culture of Death. We today do not condemn the culture of death. We are quiet. All lives matter, then we should condemn the culture of death. Quite recently, Pope Francis, speaking to the Roman Curia, spoke of the slaughter of the innocents in Gaza as a cruelty. And interestingly, the Israeli government came out all guns blazing, saying, how can you talk about this as cruelty? What about the cruelty that has been inflicted upon us? Now, I'm not taking a political side, but I would like to remind us all, if it's an eye for an eye, this has been an eye for a million eyes. it hasn't ended. Um, when we need to make very often a distinction between the Jewish people and the Israeli government, especially when we talk about Gaza. And I would like to take a stance on this. I condemn what the Israeli government is doing. You can't say that we were attacked and so we will continue to destroy and wipe you out of the face of the earth. You cannot. There are the rules of war which are clearly violated. And I know a lot of you watching might be a little upset and offended with me, but we get offended because we have already taken sides. We do not want to see the greater truth. And very often, deep within our hearts, we have taken sides because we have some grudge against the other party, which we do not want to say publicly because we don't want to sound politically incorrect, but we harbor those grudges in our hearts. The other thing I want to share is with regard to All Lives Matter, especially the life of the unborn child, is that as a church, we've got to do more than just, declare the 25th of March, one day after the Annunciation, as Pro-Life Day. I think these are not diocesanal projects limited to a day. These are missions of God, and we need to a layperson once said to me, Father, I have not heard in a very, very long time even a single homily on being pro-life, on being anti-abortion. And I must agree, neither have I, and I can't remember when I last spoke about it from a pulpit. So we need to start making pro-life issues not just a project for a day. Another reflection is that all of us experience great suffering, and Jesus also experienced suffering when he was born. He identifies with your suffering and mine. He was hunted as soon as he was born by a despot king. He had to go into exile. He was a refugee. He had to flee to Egypt. This was not a walk in the park. And God, who suffered, understands our suffering. I want to also pay tribute to all parents today, to the Josephs and Marys who live in our world, who have a constant task of protecting their children and who have to make many, many hard decisions for their own children. Look at the gospel today when the angel appears to, or rather comes to Joseph in a dream. There are no words today of comfort or consolation. When the angel first appeared to Mary, she said, "Do not be afraid." When the angel appeared to Joseph, he said, "Do not be afraid." Today there was no "do not be afraid." It was a brief message: get up, move. God doesn't always offer us comfort. Sometimes it's what I call an SOS in an SMS. Yeah, it was an SOS message for many of you who do remember what an SMS is, a short message service. Here was the angel giving an SMS: get up, move. The life of the child is in danger. I don't have the time to sit down and mollycoddle you. You need to move. And Joseph obeyed. Another reflection is that life is not always a high. There are some of us who live only for highs. Life is both a high and a low. If you take the flow of the birth of Jesus, technically, even though we will celebrate the feast of the Epiphany many days later, but technically, in the flow, in the chronology, yesterday would have been a day when the Magi came to Jesus, presented him with gold, frankincense, and myrrh, that fragrance still in the air. And today, there is an assassin at the throat of that little babe. Life is not always a high, and we need to get used to it. There are highs and lows. Contemplate, therefore, the manger. On Christmas Day, you see an innocent little baby gurgling, and everything that looks so beautiful and peaceful. And 4 days later, there is pain and there is violence, and that is life. It has its ups, it has its downs. I want to pray very quickly today for mothers, especially first-time mothers, mothers who learn on the go, mothers who learn on the run. Mary was a first-time mother, and she had to learn on the go, on the run, and she had learned to absorb a lot of pain. What Simeon said to her in Luke chapter 2, verse 35, "A sword will pierce your heart." It already began. It began with one journey to Bethlehem, the second journey in going into exile in fear as a refugee. Our Lady understood fear, she understood pain, and then she also understood she must have been terribly pained by the news which she ought to have got in Egypt, that children in Bethlehem were slaughtered by Herod so that her son would be saved. You know, hate has a ripple effect. We might think it doesn't. We think, I just hate one person. Herod's hate had a ripple effect right down to the heart of our Blessed Mother, who experienced the pain of children, innocent children, who died. I want to pray for the Josephs, all the fathers who are listening. Fathers who have been protectors, who have been loyal to the will of God, who have always said yes to the will of God. You know, the other day I was sitting at a table and a young father he just has, his son is a year and a half. He said to me, he said, Father, my phone, my camera is heavy. And I looked at him, he said, it's heavy with all the photographs I've been clicking of my son. And the other thing he said to me, he said, I wish I had this child earlier. Yeah. To all the fathers, I want to say, you are protectors, you are providers, and you are also the great source of great love to your children. May God bless you. Last 2 points. Don't be envious. Envy is dangerous. A few days ago, we saw how the Jews, on the 26th of December's liturgy, the Jews envious of Stephen killed him. And today, Herod killed many children. A few days ago, we saw how many killed one. Today's gospel, how one killed many. Where did it all come? From envy. Jesus also tells us, let the little children come to me, do not hinder them. And parents, I want to say this to you. Perhaps inadvertently, we hinder our children from coming to Jesus because we deny them Sunday school, because we think the secular studies are greater than religious studies, and inadvertently you prevent the little children, your little children, from coming to Jesus. So today is a great day. Bless your children, hug them, comfort them, kiss them, and enjoy them. Even if perhaps as grown-ups they will break your heart. But then again, we break the heart of God as grown-ups, and He forgives us. Today, you can forgive your children. If you like this teaching, share it. Maybe somebody needs it. If you like this teaching, hit the like button. If you like this teaching, send me your thoughts, your comments. And if just by chance, this is the first time you're viewing these videos, hit the subscribe button. You'll get more of me and my teachings on YouTube. Bye for now, and tomorrow I will expound the gospel. It's tomorrow, the Feast of the Holy Family. Bye, everybody.